The thing about being married for almost a decade is that you think you know everything about your spouse. The way they think, the way they speak, even the small habits that are so ingrained you don't even need to look to know they're there. Veronica and I had that kind of marriage. Predictable, comfortable, or at least that's what I thought. But if there's one thing I've learned in the last 24 hours, it's that comfort can be the most dangerous thing of all. I had no idea what was about to hit me. I didn't expect any of it. I didn't expect her to change. I didn't expect the fight that would shatter our lives. But what I certainly didn't expect was the person who showed up at my door that morning. Not in a million years. It was an ordinary night, or at least I tried to tell myself it was. We were having a quiet dinner at home, just the two of us, after a long week of work. Veronica was quieter than usual, but I figured it was just the stress from her job. She'd been working late a lot lately, and her mind seemed preoccupied. I didn't think too much of it. We sat down to eat, and I noticed she wasn't making her usual small talk. She was staring into her glass of wine, twirling it slowly. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to break the silence. "Oh yeah, I'm fine," she said, smiling weakly. But I knew something was off. The words didn't feel right. She wasn't fine, I could tell. We ate in silence for a while, until I finally heard her speak again. This time, it was almost like she was talking to herself more than to me. "I don't know why I didn't see it before," she muttered, almost absent-minded. "See what?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. She looked up at me, her eyes a little too wide, as if she were trying to gauge my reaction. I guess I was just too comfortable, too complacent. I didn't know where she was going with this, so I shrugged and went back to my plate. "Comfortable? We've been together for years. What's wrong with that?" She let out a short laugh, but it didn't sound like the happy laugh I was used to. It was more bitter, like something had soured inside of her. "You're right, Carl. We've been together for years. But comfort can be a dangerous thing. It makes you stop looking, stop questioning." I put my fork down, finally feeling the full weight of the conversation. "What are you saying?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up abruptly and walked to the kitchen. I could hear the sound of the sink running as she washed her hands. The moment stretched, dragging out like a bad omen. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She returned to the table with a small, almost unreadable expression on her face. "I think I've been living in a fantasy, Carl," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A fantasy? What does that even mean?" Veronica hesitated. Her lips trembled slightly, as if she were wrestling with some decision. Finally, she exhaled and spoke again, more firmly this time. "I've been living in this idea of what our marriage should be like, not what it actually is." I froze. The words didn't make sense. Was she saying she wanted out? Before I could gather my thoughts and respond, she reached for her phone and stood up to leave the room. She muttered something under her breath as she walked past me, something I couldn't quite make out. I heard her phone vibrate from across the room, followed by a sharp intake of breath. Veronica's face changed. The cold, distant expression from earlier returned, and she glanced at me for a split second before walking outside, disappearing into the night. I sat there, staring at my half-eaten meal, my mind racing. What was going on? What did she mean by that? I tried to ignore it, tried to chalk it up to a bad mood or work stress. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Veronica was never this distant. She never just left like that without explanation. I spent the next few hours pacing the house, waiting for her to come back. But as the clock ticked into the early hours of the morning, she still hadn't returned. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Anxiety started crawling up my spine. And then, as if the universe had a twisted sense of humor, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. I rushed to the window, my pulse quickening. The car door slammed shut, and I saw Veronica walking toward the door, her face pale, her eyes wide. She didn't look like my wife anymore. She looked like a stranger. And just as she reached for the doorknob, I heard it, the sound of someone else. Someone behind her. A shadow in the night. She opened the door, and I froze. There, standing in front of me, was a man I didn't recognize. A tall figure, his face partially obscured by the dim light. But his eyes, they were burning with intensity. He didn't say a word, but the look he gave me said everything I needed to know. And as Veronica stepped aside, allowing him into the house, my world completely shattered. The man was no stranger to her. And that was the first sign that everything I thought I knew about my wife was a lie. I stood frozen at the door, unable to move or speak as Veronica stepped aside, allowing the stranger into our home. The man was tall, well-built, dressed in a dark coat that seemed to absorb the dim light of the hallway. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and they never left mine as he entered. Veronica didn't say a word, and neither did I. For a long moment, we just stood there, locked in this surreal standoff. The air felt thick, suffocating even. My heart pounded in my chest as a rush of adrenaline kicked in. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to react, to shout, to demand answers, but I couldn't seem to find my voice. What was happening? Who was this man? And why did Veronica look at him with such familiarity? She wasn't even looking at me. Her eyes were focused solely on him, as though I wasn't even there. The silence was deafening. I watched as Veronica took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what was about to happen. Then, slowly, she turned her gaze toward me, her face unreadable. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words that came out weren't what I expected. "You should leave, Carl," she said softly, almost apologetically. My stomach twisted. Leave, leave. I was standing at the door, my heart racing, and she was telling me to leave? What the hell is going on? My voice was low, trembling with disbelief. Who is this guy? Why is he here? Veronica's expression didn't change. She glanced at the man briefly before looking back at me. "This is Thomas," she said, her voice flat. "We've been seeing each other." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Seeing each other? What the hell was she talking about? This man, Thomas, this stranger, had been seeing my wife behind my back? I felt like the floor was collapsing beneath me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about Veronica, felt like it was crumbling around me. "Veronica, are you serious right now? You've been seeing this man?" The anger bubbled up inside me, but I was still in shock. I couldn't process what was happening. This had to be some kind of sick joke, right? Maybe she was playing some twisted game. But as I looked at her, I saw no sign of jest. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't apologizing. She was just standing there. "Carl, it's complicated," Veronica said, stepping forward. Her hand reached out, but I stepped back instinctively, as though her touch would burn me. "I didn't want to hurt you, but things changed." Things changed. My world had just been shattered in front of my eyes, and she was standing there, speaking in these calm, detached sentences as if it were nothing. "How long has this been going on?" My voice cracked, but I couldn't hold back the question. I needed to know. I had to know. Veronica looked away for a moment, then back at me. "A while now. A few months, actually." A few months. I didn't know what to say. The shock was still too fresh, too overwhelming. I looked at Thomas, this man who had been secretly with my wife, and felt a mix of confusion and rage. His face was completely impassive, almost too calm for someone who had just been admitted into my home like this. He didn't look worried. In fact, he looked like he'd been here 100 times before. "You're just going to stand there, Carl?" Thomas finally spoke, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "You should be grateful she even told you the truth. Most guys wouldn't get that. You've had your time. It's over." The way he said it, the coldness in his words, made my blood boil. I turned to look at Veronica, hoping for some sign of remorse, some indication that this wasn't as real as it seemed, but all I saw in her eyes was resignation. It wasn't the look of someone who had been caught. It was the look of someone who had already moved on. "You've been lying to me for months," I said, the anger finally breaking through the numbness. "And now you're just okay with this, with him?" Veronica didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Thomas, as if silently asking for permission. He gave her a slight nod, then looked back at me with that infuriatingly calm expression. "This is your chance to walk away, Carl," Thomas said, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. "You're in the way now. Just let it go." I didn't know what came over me, but something inside me snapped. All this time, I had been blind, thinking that everything was fine, that our marriage was something solid. But now, here was the truth. My wife, my Veronica, had been seeing someone else, behind my back, and she was just standing there, letting him tell me to leave my own house. My mind raced, and I could feel the weight of my frustration rising. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not until I get some answers." Veronica took a deep breath, stepping between Thomas and me. Her hand hovered in the air, as if she were about to reach out again. But before she could, I shook my head, stepping back. "No," I said firmly. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I just want the truth." She looked at me for a long moment, her face blank. And then, almost as if it were the hardest thing she'd ever done, she spoke the words I never thought I'd hear. "I didn't want to hurt you, Carl," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "But I haven't loved you in months. I've been lying to you about everything." It felt like the ground beneath me had given way. The woman I had trusted, the woman I thought I knew. Was she really telling me this? Was it really over? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But in that moment, I just felt empty. Everything I had built with Veronica, every plan, every promise, it was all a lie. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears. And yet, for all the intensity of the moment, there was this eerie, suffocating calm. Veronica was standing there, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, but her words had already pierced me deeper than I thought possible. "I haven't loved you in months," she said, her voice thin, cracking with the weight of the confession. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand an explanation, but instead, I stood there, numb. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. Veronica, my wife of 7 years, the woman I had thought I knew better than anyone, was standing in front of me, telling me she had stopped loving me months ago. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But there she was, no more tears, no more remorse, just a cold, flat expression that seemed to say everything I needed to know. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. She wasn't the woman I had spent years with, sharing our lives, our dreams, our hopes. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I looked at Thomas, standing behind her, quiet as ever, his face still as calm and emotionless as it had been when he first walked into the house. He wasn't just a man Veronica was seeing on the side. No, he was part of something much darker, something much bigger than I had ever imagined. I knew it in the pit of my stomach. "What do you want from me, Veronica?" I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I didn't know what else to say. I felt like I was losing my grip on everything. "What? You've been with him this whole time. You've been lying to me for months, pretending everything was fine, while you were sneaking around with him." She shook her head, but there was no guilt, no sorrow in her eyes. "It wasn't like that, Carl. It wasn't about you, it was about me. I couldn't keep pretending anymore." She seemed to be looking at me, but her gaze was distant, like she was speaking to someone else, or perhaps to herself. I didn't know how to process what she was saying. Nothing made sense. I felt like I was stuck in a fog, where time moved too quickly and too slowly all at once. Veronica had always been my rock. Sure, we'd had our issues like every couple, but I never once imagined she'd completely check out, emotionally and physically, without a word. How did I not see this coming? How did I not notice the signs? I had been so blind. The silence hung heavy between us, but Veronica wasn't done. She stepped closer, her eyes softening for a brief moment, and I saw a flicker of something. Regret, maybe, but it was gone before I could grab onto it. "I met him a few months ago," she said quietly, her voice so low that it almost seemed like she was confessing a sin. "It started out innocent, just a few texts here and there, but then, I don't know. He understood me in ways you couldn't anymore." She glanced at Thomas, and I saw his lips twitch, just slightly, as if he were proud of her admission. It made my blood boil, but I couldn't stop myself from asking. "So, you think he understands you? Better than I ever did?" Veronica didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me with this strange, almost pitying expression, as though she was watching me unravel, watching my world fall apart. And then, she said it. "I don't think. I know." Her words were like a slap in the face, and I had to physically steady myself to avoid falling. I felt a wave of dizziness take over. How could she say that to me? How could she say it so coldly? I wanted to yell, to rage against this reality, but I just stood there, feeling smaller than I ever had before. I had always thought I was the one who understood Veronica, that I was the one who could see through her moods, her little quirks, the things that made her, her. But now, it felt like everything I knew was a lie. Every gesture, every kiss, every "I love you" she had ever given me suddenly felt empty. I looked at Thomas again, the man who had been the catalyst for this destruction. His eyes met mine, not with any fear or shame, but with this strange kind of challenge, like he was daring me to make a move. I hated him for it, for the way he seemed to think he had already won, but what could I do? What was left for me to say? "Carl, you should go," Veronica said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quieter now, but still firm. There was no more softness, no more attempt to make things better. "Please, I don't want to do this here, in front of him." I couldn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I had always been the one to leave. I was the one who worked late, who went out of town for business, who kept our life running smoothly. She was the one who stayed home, the one who built the life we had together. But now she was telling me to leave, to just go. My mind raced. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers. How could she do this? How could she just toss everything aside so easily? The years, the memories, the love I thought we shared. It all felt like it meant nothing. I felt like a fool. I felt worthless. "You want me to just leave?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the disbelief thick in every word. "Yes," she said, her voice almost pleading now, but still resolute. "I don't want to hurt you more, Carl. I really don't. But it's over." And just like that, it was done. I didn't know how I made it out of the house that night. My body was on autopilot, moving through motions that felt foreign, like I wasn't even in control anymore. I walked out into the cold night air, the chill of it biting at my skin, but it didn't feel like enough to clear the fog in my head. I drove aimlessly for hours, the weight of her words pressing down on me with every mile. I didn't even know where I was going. There was no destination. There was no plan. I just needed to escape. And in the silence of the night, as I drove through empty streets, I couldn't help but think, was this really the end? Was I really going to let her go? Was there any way to fix this? I didn't have the answers. But as I turned onto a dark, unfamiliar road, a strange feeling crept over me. Maybe this wasn't just the end of us. Maybe it was the beginning of something else. And that thought scared me more than anything. I spent the next few days in a daze. The kind of days where everything around you seems surreal, like you're watching life happen through a thick pane of glass. Veronica and I didn't talk. She didn't reach out, and I didn't want to either. After everything that had happened, there was nothing left to say. I knew what she had decided, and part of me, deep down, had known it was coming. But the pain of it, that was something I wasn't prepared for. I found myself staring at the empty space beside me in bed, at the quiet house that had once been filled with laughter and plans for the future. It felt hollow now, like a stage that had been abandoned before the curtain even rose. The words she had said echoed in my mind. "I haven't loved you in months," and I wondered, how long had she been gone before that? How long had she been slipping away, leaving me behind without a trace? I couldn't figure it out. I replayed every moment, every word, and every gesture, trying to find the clues I must have missed. But it wasn't like a mystery where you could connect the dots. The signs were subtle, too subtle. Veronica had always been good at hiding her emotions, always able to put on the perfect front. I had been so busy with my own life, my own work, my own world, that I failed to see the cracks forming beneath the surface of our marriage. Days went by, and the emptiness of our house started to weigh heavier on me. It wasn't just the silence, it was the absence of everything. The feeling of being unimportant, of being irrelevant. My thoughts spiraled into dark places. What had I done wrong? How could I fix this? Was it possible to fix something that had been broken for so long? Something I hadn't even known was broken? I needed answers. I needed something, anything, to understand what had happened, what went wrong. But each time I tried to talk to Veronica, she shut me down. No more conversations, no more explanations. Just the cold, hard truth. She was done, and there was no going back. But then, just when I thought I couldn't feel any more lost, something happened that would change everything. I was sitting at home, alone, nursing a glass of whiskey as the evening drew in. The weight of the silence was almost unbearable, but it was the only thing I had left, quiet and stillness, the remnants of a life that no longer felt like mine. I had just finished a call with work, trying to keep my mind occupied with something other than the mess my life had become, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't in the mood for visitors, but who could it be at this hour? I opened the door slowly, half expecting it to be someone from the neighborhood or maybe a delivery, but what I saw made my heart stop. Standing in front of me was Thomas, the man who had been the cause of all this chaos, the man who had turned my world upside down. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of his presence, his smug, self-assured smile. He wasn't here by accident. He had come for something, and I had no idea what that was. "What do you want?" I finally managed to ask, my voice flat and distant. I was done pretending like this was just some misunderstanding. I knew why he was here. He wasn't here for an apology. He wasn't here to make amends. He was here for something else. Thomas stepped forward, not waiting for an invitation. He pushed the door open slightly and entered, like he had every right to be there. "I thought we should talk," he said calmly, his eyes scanning the room as if it were his own. "Talk about what?" I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "You've already taken everything from me. What more is there to talk about?" He looked at me, unbothered by my anger. His expression didn't change. "I'm not here for you, Carl. I'm here for Veronica." Something in me snapped. "What do you mean, you're here for Veronica?" My voice was shaking now, my fists clenched at my sides. "She's my wife. If you think you're going to come into my house, my life, and just take her—" "I'm not taking her, Carl," he interrupted, his tone growing sharper. "She's already made her choice. She chose me. What's left for you to fight for?" I wanted to punch him. The arrogance in his voice was infuriating, but there was something else, something that made me hesitate. I could feel the darkness in the air, the subtle tension that told me this wasn't just a simple visit. There was more to this than just Veronica choosing him. There was something dangerous about this man, something I hadn't fully understood before. "Then why are you here?" I demanded, my voice steadying despite the fire burning in my chest. Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at me, his gaze calculating, as if he were weighing his options. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. "Because I'm offering you a deal," he said slowly, his voice low and smooth. "And it's the only chance you'll get to walk away with anything left." My mind raced. What kind of deal? I couldn't understand what he was talking about. Was he trying to make some kind of power play? Was he trying to get under my skin? But the look in his eyes told me this wasn't a game. This was real. "What deal?" I asked, my voice now a mix of confusion and dread. Thomas leaned in slightly, his lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I can make sure you leave this situation with your dignity intact. I can make sure that Veronica doesn't drag you through the mud. But there's a catch." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I was no fool. I knew a trap when I saw one. But there was something in his words that piqued my curiosity. What was he really offering? What could a man like him offer me that I didn't already have? "I'm listening," I said, though I wasn't sure if I should be. Thomas smiled again, a glint of something dark flashing in his eyes. "You'll do exactly what I say, and you'll leave Veronica and me alone." I wanted to say no, to kick him out and slam the door in his face, but a part of me was terrified of what would happen if I did. What was his next move? What was really going on behind the scenes? "I'll think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That was a lie. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. But I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The moment Thomas left, I felt this unsettling quiet descend over me, heavier than before. It wasn't the kind of quiet where you could just relax and let your mind wander. No, this was suffocating, like the silence before a storm. His words echoed in my head. "Leave Veronica and me alone." That was the deal. The offer. Walk away with dignity. But I couldn't just forget everything that had happened. I couldn't walk away without understanding the why. I hadn't asked for any of this. I hadn't asked for Veronica to betray me, for Thomas to walk into my life with that smug grin of his, or for her to choose him over me. I had always thought our marriage was solid. I was wrong. Now, there was this offer, a way to leave with some shred of dignity. It sounded so simple, yet I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more at play here than I was being told. Thomas didn't offer deals out of kindness. He wasn't interested in helping me. There was something darker at the core of his proposal, something that sent chills down my spine. And Veronica, her silence after his departure, her lack of emotion, it was as though everything had been calculated. She had chosen him, and maybe that was all I needed to know. But I couldn't just walk away without digging deeper. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. Work felt pointless. I kept thinking about the offer, about what Thomas had said, about Veronica's cold detachment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being manipulated, but by whom? And for what? On the fourth night after Thomas had visited, I couldn't take it anymore. The silence in my house was unbearable. I had to confront Veronica again. I had to hear it from her. Why? I drove to her apartment. It wasn't far, just a 10-minute drive, but it felt like an eternity. Every part of me wanted to turn back, but my curiosity, my need for answers, kept me going. As I parked in front of the building, I hesitated for a moment. What was I even going to say to her? Could anything I said change what had already happened? Could I reason with her? The thought felt ridiculous, but I had to try. I found her door locked. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the knob, but I didn't try to force it open. Instead, I knocked. Once. Twice. The sound of my fist against the wood felt like it echoed through the hallway, louder than it should have. My pulse raced as I waited. When the door finally creaked open, it wasn't Veronica who answered. It was Thomas. His cold gaze met mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like amusement in his eyes. He stepped aside without saying a word, allowing me to enter. The sudden sense of power he had over me made me furious, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't here for him. I was here for Veronica. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on the floor. The sight of her made my chest tighten. She hadn't even looked up when I entered. It was like I was a stranger to her. The woman I had shared my life with, my love, was no longer in that room. "Veronica," I said, my voice strained. She didn't respond, didn't move. I took a step closer, my mind a whirl of emotions, none of them good. "Look at me." When she finally lifted her head, her eyes met mine, but there was no warmth, no recognition. Her expression was distant, as if I were someone from her past. My heart sank, and I felt this overwhelming wave of sorrow wash over me. This wasn't the woman I had known, not the one I had fought for, cared for, or loved. "Why, Veronica?" I whispered, unable to keep the tears from my eyes. "Why him? Why now?" She sighed softly, not in frustration, but in something that seemed like resignation. As if the answer to my question was something too simple for me to understand. "I've already told you, Carl," she said, her voice low and flat. "I haven't loved you in months. I don't feel the same way anymore." Her gaze drifted away from mine, as though she couldn't bear to hold it. "Things changed. I changed. And it wasn't about you. It's about me finding something else, something I didn't even know I needed." Her words stabbed at me. They were so clinical, so void of emotion that they felt more like a death sentence than anything else. She wasn't trying to hurt me, not in the way I thought. She was simply stating the truth as she saw it. And that truth was that I no longer mattered to her. "But you loved me once," I said, my voice hoarse. "We had a life, a future." Her eyes flickered for a moment, and for a second, I thought I saw the woman I once knew. But it vanished quickly. "That was then," she said quietly. "This is now. I'm not the same person, Carl, and I can't keep pretending. I can't keep pretending that you're the one I want. You deserve better than that." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I say? Could I convince her? Could I make her see that we had something real, that this was just a rough patch? But I knew the truth deep down. She had made up her mind, and I wasn't a part of it anymore. Then why keep me around? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at Thomas, who was standing in the corner, his arms crossed over his chest. He wasn't saying anything, but the way he looked at her, with that subtle smirk on his face, made my blood boil. This man, this thing, had destroyed everything I had worked so hard to build. And Veronica, my wife, was letting him. "I'm not here to fight for you, Carl," she finally said. Her words were calm, but the finality in them was clear. "I'm not here to make you believe in us anymore. I've already made my choice." That was it. The line had been drawn. I knew then that there was no going back. Veronica had moved on, and there was nothing I could do to change that. Thomas stepped forward, breaking the silence that had settled between us. "You've heard her, Carl. It's over. It's time for you to go." I stared at him, my blood boiling. He was treating me like an intruder in my own life, in my own home. But there was something else in his eyes, a coldness that spoke of power, of control. It made my skin crawl. For a moment, I thought about fighting back, about screaming, about demanding that Veronica listen, that she give me a chance. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew that everything was already lost. And fighting against them was just a way to prolong the inevitable. With one last look at Veronica, I turned and left. I couldn't stay there anymore. I couldn't stay in a place that no longer felt like home. As I stepped out of the apartment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but it wasn't the relief I expected. No, it was the hollow feeling of having nowhere to go. And I knew, with a sick certainty, that this wasn't the end of it. The deal Thomas had offered was just the beginning. And if I didn't take it, I had no idea what kind of storm would follow. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were Veronica's distant eyes, Thomas's cold smile, and the life I had thought I'd built crumbling to dust before my very eyes. My mind wouldn't let me rest. I tried to distract myself, watching TV, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, but nothing worked. The images kept coming back, over and over. The coldness in her voice, the look of indifference she gave me. I had never imagined that this would be how our story ended. But it had. There was no denying it. My wife, the woman I loved, had chosen someone else, and there was nothing left for me in that apartment. But what disturbed me more than anything was the unsettling feeling that kept gnawing at me. Something was wrong, deeper than just her leaving me for Thomas. It wasn't just about losing her, it was about him. About what he was really doing here, and what kind of power he had over her, over everything. I couldn't shake the sense that there was more to this story than just a simple affair. I had a feeling I was being played, and I wasn't sure who was pulling the strings. I couldn't get the conversation out of my head. The deal he'd offered me. It sounded so simple at the time. Leave Veronica and me alone, and I'll make sure you leave with your dignity intact. But what did that really mean? What was he really offering? What kind of game was he playing? And why was Veronica so willing to let him make decisions for her? I had to know. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus on anything. I was a walking zombie, my mind constantly racing back to that apartment, to Veronica, to Thomas. I had to figure out what they were hiding, what they weren't telling me. The only way I would get answers was to go back to their world, to dive in, head first, and confront whatever it was that I was too blind to see before. The phone call came around noon. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me it was important. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. It was him, Thomas. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen, then I swiped it to answer. Carl. His voice was smooth, unsettlingly calm. I've been thinking about our conversation. You don't have to make any decisions right away, but I do think we need to clear the air. There's a lot you don't understand, and I'd prefer to explain it all in person. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean, clear the air? What is this all really about, Thomas? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said something that made my stomach twist. Meet me. I'll explain everything. I think it's time you know exactly what you're dealing with. My mind raced. What was this? Another game? Another way to get me to back off? Or was it something else entirely? Where? I asked, my voice tight. Where do you want to meet? There's a cafe on 7th Avenue. You'll know it when you see it. Don't make me wait long. And with that, he hung up. No goodbye. No pleasantries. Just the unmistakable click of the line disconnecting. I had no choice. I had to go. Whatever this was, I needed answers. I needed to understand how deep the hole really went. I arrived at the cafe an hour later. It wasn't crowded, just a few people scattered around, sipping coffee, working on laptops. I walked inside, scanning the room, and there he was, sitting in the back booth, his legs casually crossed, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. Sit, he said, nodding toward the seat across from him. I didn't hesitate. I slid into the booth, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm listening, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Thomas didn't speak right away. He took a slow sip of his coffee, eyes never leaving mine, his lips curling slightly at the edges. He seemed completely at ease. I, on the other hand, felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, waiting for something to push me over. You know, Carl, it's funny, Thomas said, finally breaking the silence. I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen men like you before. Men who think they have everything under control. Men who think their lives are perfect. And then, when things fall apart, when they finally see the truth, it's too late. I clenched my jaw. I don't know what you're talking about. Just tell me what the hell is going on. What is all this? He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower, almost conspiratorial. Veronica wasn't just your wife, Carl. She's been part of something much bigger than you. You were just the placeholder, the safe choice. You were the one who kept everything in line while she was figuring out what she really wanted. His words hit me like a freight train. What do you mean, bigger? What the hell does that even mean? Thomas's smile widened, but it wasn't kind. It was cold, calculating. You still don't get it, do you? Veronica's not just some innocent woman who got caught up in an affair. She's a part of something else. I felt my throat tighten. What are you talking about, Thomas? Are you saying she's been with you this whole time because of some game? Thomas shook his head slowly. Not a game. A plan. You see, Veronica and we've been working together. This wasn't about love for her. It never was. It was about using you, Carl. Using you to create a facade. A perfect little life. She needed you to play your part, to make everything look just right, while she and I were getting what we needed. I could barely breathe. My mind spun. You've been using me? You and her? All this time? Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Exactly. But don't feel bad. You weren't the only one. A lot of men like you get caught in the trap. They don't see the bigger picture. They never do. The words felt like they were suffocating me. I couldn't process what he was saying. I wanted to yell, to throw something at him, to demand he explain everything. But I didn't. Instead, I asked the only question that seemed to matter. Why are you telling me this now? Thomas leaned back in his seat, his smile returning, but this time it didn't even seem like a victory. It was something darker. Because, Carl, you're not going to walk away from this. Not unless you want everything to collapse. Veronica has chosen her side, and you have a choice to make. I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean? His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something dangerous in them. You can accept what's happening, Carl, or I can make sure it all comes crashing down. His words hung in the air like a threat, and I knew, in that moment, that I was in far deeper than I'd ever imagined. The world I thought I knew, the life I had built, none of it was real. It had all been a lie. My heart was pounding in my chest, the words Thomas had just said echoing in my ears. You're not going to walk away from this. That's what he had told me, his voice so calm, so assured, like he was telling me the weather forecast. He wasn't just speaking about Veronica, about our marriage, or about betrayal. No, he was talking about something much bigger, something I couldn't even begin to understand. The chill creeping up my spine wasn't from the cold cafe air, but from the weight of the truth starting to settle in. Everything I had believed about my life was being twisted into something unrecognizable. You think Veronica and I are just playing games, that we've been using you? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. My mind was racing, 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. How had I been so blind? How had I not seen this from the beginning? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Veronica's coldness in the past months, the distance, the strange changes, none of it was random. None of it was just stress or minor relationship hiccups. This had been carefully orchestrated, and I had been too caught up in my own life to notice. Thomas nodded slowly, his gaze steady and unwavering. Exactly. You were the perfect pawn in our little game, Carl. You kept everything in order, you gave her what she needed, but you never saw the bigger picture. You never saw the deal we made. The words stung, but something else began to gnaw at me, something more unsettling than just the betrayal. I had been kept in the dark, yes, but who was really pulling the strings? Who was making the bigger moves behind the scenes? And what kind of deal had Thomas just mentioned? My stomach twisted at the thought. I leaned forward, ignoring the tension in my body, the anger that was rising with each new revelation. What deal? What the hell are you talking about? Thomas's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had won. It was the smile of someone who was about to lay the final piece of a puzzle on the table, and he knew I wouldn't be able to avoid seeing the whole picture. The deal, Carl, was simple. Veronica needed someone who could help her keep up appearances, someone stable. You were that person, but that's not what she wanted long-term. That's not where her true loyalty lies. Veronica and I had a plan, and it worked perfectly. His voice grew softer, almost like he was savoring each word. She's been working with us, Carl, the whole time. I stared at him, disbelief written all over my face. Working with you? What are you, some kind of organization? The words felt absurd as I said them, but I couldn't stop myself. What else could this be? This wasn't just about an affair. This wasn't some petty betrayal between two people. This was something far darker. You still don't understand, Thomas said, shaking his head slightly, almost pityingly. Veronica isn't just a woman who got tired of her marriage. She's part of something bigger, Carl. She's been involved with people far more dangerous than you think. And now, you're a part of that, too. I leaned back, stunned into silence. What the hell are you talking about? Dangerous people? My voice was barely a whisper. You mean, she's been involved with criminals? With you? Thomas's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement, or was it something darker? I couldn't tell. It's not about me, Carl. And it's not about Veronica being a criminal. It's about power, control, influence. You see, Veronica was always the perfect fit. Smart, charming, capable. And she needed someone like me to help her make the moves that would elevate both of us. I couldn't process it. I had been living in a dream world, thinking I knew the woman I married. But the truth, now, was splintering apart before me. Veronica hadn't just been unfaithful. She hadn't just been looking for a new lover. She had been playing a game, a dangerous one, with high stakes, and I had been her unwitting pawn. What exactly is it that you do? I asked, the words leaving my mouth before I even thought about them. I couldn't help myself. I had to know. I had to understand what I was really up against. Thomas's gaze never wavered, and he leaned in, his voice dropping low. I'm in the business of connections, Carl. The kind of connections that make things happen. And Veronica? She's been helping me get what I need. But that's all you need to know for now. A chill ran down my spine as his words sunk in. What kind of business was this? What kind of connections was he talking about? And what had Veronica gotten herself involved in? I had never seen her in that light before. I had always seen her as the woman I could trust, the woman I loved, the woman who had been by my side for so many years. But now, in this moment, I realized I had been blind. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But as much as I hated Thomas, I knew he wasn't the one pulling all the strings. It was Veronica who had made the choice. It was Veronica who had led me down this path. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. So what now, Thomas? What do you want from me? His expression didn't change. He didn't look smug, but he didn't look worried either. He just looked calculating. What I want, Carl, is simple. I want you to accept that Veronica and I have made our choice. I want you to step away. If you don't, I'll make sure everything in your life falls apart. You don't get to play the hero here. I stared at him, my mind whirling. He was making threats. He was trying to control me. But I wasn't the one who had been blind to all of this. It wasn't just about love anymore. This wasn't just a broken marriage. This was a game I had never been meant to play. So what's the deal? I asked, still trying to make sense of the mess in my mind. You want me to leave, to walk away, and you'll let me have my dignity? Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing with a hint of satisfaction. That's the deal. It's a clean break. Walk away, and you'll never hear from us again. But if you don't, Carl, trust me, I won't hesitate to drag you into something you can't escape. I felt the weight of his words settle over me like a blanket of fear. This was no longer just about Veronica. It wasn't even about my marriage anymore. This was about something much bigger, much more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I had been living in a bubble, unaware of the storm brewing around me. And now, with one simple offer, Thomas was making it clear I was no longer in control. But there was a part of me, a stubborn, defiant part, that refused to just walk away. I wasn't going to be intimidated. Not yet. But the question still lingered in my mind. How far was I willing to go to get back what I had lost? And more importantly, how far was Thomas willing to take this? The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog, a strange mix of dread and determination clouding my every step. Everything I had believed about my life, my marriage, had been shattered, but I still wasn't ready to let go. I wasn't ready to walk away, to let Thomas win without a fight. But I knew I had to make a choice. I had to decide what kind of man I wanted to be in the wake of this disaster. The more I thought about what Thomas had said, the more I realized something important. It wasn't just about Veronica or Thomas. It was about me, about my future. I had been living in the shadow of what others wanted me to be for far too long. I had let the world, and people like Thomas, tell me how to live my life. I had let them dictate the terms of my happiness. But not anymore. I went to see Veronica one last time. This time without the fear of her judgment or Thomas's looming presence. I needed to face her. I needed to understand, even if it hurt, why she had made the choices she did. When I knocked on her door, there was a long pause before she answered. Her eyes were tired, her face older than I remembered, but when she saw me, there was no anger, no resentment, only exhaustion. "Carl," she said quietly, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" "I need answers, Veronica. But more than that, I need to tell you something," I said, my voice steady despite everything inside me wanting to break down. I took a deep breath. I can't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And I can't keep fighting a battle that's already been lost. Her eyes flickered with something, guilt, sorrow, but I wasn't there for her pity. I was there for me. "I don't know how to fix this, Veronica. But I do know one thing," I continued, meeting her gaze. "I'm done letting other people control my life. I've spent too much time living in the shadows of what others want for me. I can't keep doing that. I deserve better than this." She looked at me in silence for a moment, and then something surprising happened. A small tear slid down her cheek, but instead of pity, it felt like an apology. "Carl, I never meant to hurt you. I was so lost in everything. I didn't even realize what I was doing until it was too late. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this." I nodded, not out of anger, but out of understanding. "You made your choice, and I made mine. But I'm not going to stay stuck in the past. I need to move forward, and I need to do that on my own." Veronica didn't argue. Instead, she stepped aside and allowed me into her apartment. It was no longer the place I had once called home, but it didn't matter anymore. We didn't need to go over the past, not really. We just needed to accept that it was time to let go. "I want you to be happy, Carl," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to find peace with everything, even if that means leaving me behind." "I will," I said, finally feeling a sense of release. "I will." I walked out of her apartment with a weight lifting from my chest. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what my future would look like. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the power to rebuild, to start fresh. Veronica and Thomas had tried to dictate my life, but now I knew that the choices I made would be mine alone. I didn't need them to define who I was. I was free. As I walked down the street, the weight of the past lifted with every step. I had no idea what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. It was going to be my story, my life. And I was finally ready to live it on my own terms. It wasn't easy. It never is. But I had learned one invaluable lesson. In the face of betrayal, in the face of everything crumbling around you, you have to find your own way forward. And that's exactly what I did. In the end, it was the best decision I ever made.